Hello everyone. Today we're going to review character traits and motivations. Let's take a look at the Getting the Ideas section for some information on this topic. A character is a person or animal in a story, play, or poem. In fact, a character can be any creature that comes from the author's imagination. Characters are essential parts of a literary work, and understanding them can enhance a reader's understanding of the text. Characters have traits or qualities that define them. So I'm going to highlight that traits are qualities that define those characters. For example, think about the character traits of some well-known characters. Tom Sawyer is mischievous, Goldilocks is curious, and Paul Bunyan is strong. Now let's read this chart below to find out more about how characters are shaped. In this chart, there are two columns, one for the element and one as an example. These elements reveal character traits. One way an author can reveal a character's traits is through the character's actions. Here's an example. Lisa snuck into her brother's room and took $5 from his wallet. Without even reading the next sentence, we know that Lisa's trait is definitely dishonesty because she stole something. Okay, so if you were to say that her character trait is a thief, no, she is a thief, but that is not a character trait. The character trait here in this case is dishonesty. Another way that character traits can be revealed is through dialogue. Now, if you recall, dialogue is when characters speak to each other. Here's an example. Will you hurry up? I don't have all day, Ed yelled. In this case, Ed's trait is impatience. We can see that he's not willing to wait, so therefore the trait is impatience. Another way character traits are revealed is through the thoughts and emotions that are shown by the author in the text. Here's an example. Tariq wondered if he would ever dare say hello to Aisha. So therefore Tariq's trait is shyness. Obviously, he can't put himself up to go ahead and even talk to her. So therefore he's quite shy. Another way the character traits are shown is through the interactions with other characters. Here's an example. Casey rushed to open the door as Ty approached on crutches. He helped Ty into a seat and brought him a drink. So Casey's trait is thoughtfulness. He went ahead and opened the door, brought him a drink, very thoughtful of him. Another way that character traits can be revealed is by the author's direct statements. Actually, the author states the character trait directly. Here's an example. Brenda had always been ambitious. She worked 12-hour days hoping for a promotion. Brenda's trait is persistent. Absolutely, she is persistent. And also, she's ambitious. Okay, so I'm going to highlight ambitious because ambition is a character trait. A lot of people are not. They're content with their life and they're satisfied with the way things are going. So maybe they won't be persistent in order to reach a certain goal. In this case, she was hoping for that promotion. Now to continue, most characters have more than one trait, and they often change during a story. For instance, a greedy boy may learn to share with others. In the story of King Midas, a greedy man is granted the power to turn everything he touches to gold. He learns his lesson when he loses many things and people he loves this way. Read carefully though, in some stories a good character may become evil. Does King Midas become evil? You'll have to read that story in order to find out. Now let's take a look at character motivations. Character motivations are the reasons why they act the way they do. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight motivations. And notice the word or, which is letting us know that it's the reasons why they act the way they do. Now let's take a look at this example. In a famous novel by Alexander Dumas called The Count of Monte Cristo, the main character, Edmond Dante, is betrayed by his friend and unjustly imprisoned. His suffering is so immense that when he escapes from prison, he sets an elaborate plan into action to destroy his enemies. His motivation is revenge, and it guides the plot throughout the novel. This is a true suspense story. As Dante faces each obstacle, we truly never know what the outcome is going to be. So we can see that Dante, I'm going to go ahead and highlight Dante, that his motivation is revenge. Okay, so we can see that we can determine a character traits through even characters' motivations. Now to continue, sometimes we feel suspense because we know and anticipate a certain outcome. An author might choose to give the reader information that a character in the story does not know. When we know something more than a character does, we might anticipate a conflict to take place and think, don't do it. This literary device is called dramatic irony. I'm going to highlight dramatic irony. This is very, very important. You're going to see it later on in the passages you're going to be reading. An author uses point of view, the perspective from which a story is told, to reveal as much or as little to the reader as the author chooses. For instance, in William Shakespeare's Othello, the audience knows that Iago is evil and is deceiving Othello because Shakespeare reveals Iago's private conversations. In other words, he reveals the private conversations to you, the reader, but Othello does not know this. However, Othello constantly refers to Iago as a good and honest friend. This creates suspense as the audience waits for the moment that Othello learns the truth. That's where we get that term here, don't do it. You are telling Othello, don't trust him because you know something that he doesn't. That is a very good technique or common technique that authors use. And Shakespeare loved to use dramatic irony. Othello is another play that is very good to read. If you get a chance, look it up. Now, the setting can have a direct effect on characters as well. The novel Brave New World by Aldous Huxley takes place mostly in London in the 26th century. In this futuristic society, people are free from war, poverty, and disease. Sounds great, doesn't it? However, the government controls every aspect of their lives, eliminating their freedom and individuality. The setting causes things to happen to characters that would not happen otherwise. Now let's take a look at this thinking it through. It says read the following paragraph and then answer the question that follows. It says Rick leaned back in the recliner and watched the credits roll on the TV screen. His show was over, but he'd left the remote control by the cable box. Oh man, that sucks. He'd have to get up from the recliner to change the channel. Rick thought about that as he watched the shampoo commercial. He almost got up during the car commercial. He was still contemplating his situation during a sneakers commercial. Finally, he realized that someone was bound to come into the living room sooner or later. All he has to do was wait. Now it says which word best describes Rick and why. Now, obviously there's not a choice of words here. So the trick here is to find a word that best describes Rick and explain why you think that. Okay? Say, for example, you thought that he's lazy. Well, you need to explain why you think he's lazy, and you would use evidence from the text. If you say that he's smart because he's going to wait for somebody else, because he knows somebody's going to show up, then you need to explain why. Either way, the answer would be right as long as you explain it correctly, that your reasoning is sound. That is very important. So your job is to answer this question before you move on to the next section. Give me a sentence where you explain the why, and you're good to go. Now, in this section for the coached instruction, you're going to use the reading guide to help you focus on understanding characters. Now, there are 3 questions here, or 3 statements that you are going to answer. Okay, so for number 1, on this passage called Foreign Soil, number 1 says, what is the setting of the passage? What effect does it have on the character? So this is a 2-part question. The first part, tell me what the setting is. Remember, the setting has to do with the place where the story takes place, or even the time. It could be in the past, it could be the future, the present. But the second part, you also have to answer. What effect does it have on the characters? So make sure that you answer that part. Now, these are short answers. You don't need to explain anything. Just tell me what the setting is, and then just tell me what the characters are. If you like, you can separate them into 2 separate sentences or put bullet points. For number 2, The statement says, dramatic irony occurs when one character is unaware of information that another character or the reader may have. Just as in the example shown above, where it talked about Othello and Iago, where the reader or the audience knows information that the main character does not. All you got to do here is circle the knowledge that Aidan Gallagher has that his son, Liam, does not. So just find out what Aidan knows, and obviously what Liam does not. And then finally, for number 3, it says underline a sentence that shows that Aidan cares about his family's well-being. Now be careful with this one. There may be some things in here that you think, well, yeah, that shows that he cares. But there's something specific. And here's a little hint. It is not on this page. It is on the next. Now, before you answer this question for the coached instruction, you want to think about what are Aidan's motivations for moving his family to America. Once you know that, you need to think about this question as well. How does the author's use of dramatic irony add tension to the story? If you'll notice, these two discuss questions were mentioned or discussed in the reading guide, and that should help you figure out the answers to those two in the discuss. Now, the discuss questions, you don't need to write anything. It's just for you to think about before you answer the apply question. So for the apply question, it says, answer the following questions about the passage. How does Liam change from the beginning of the story to the end? So he has a certain way of thinking at the beginning, and later on towards the end, he changes his way of thinking. So we can see that he realizes something. And that's what a change is. You're going to have to determine what that change is. Best thing I can tell you is to take a look at the think it through. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight thinking it through. It says to answer, I need to think about what Liam is like at the beginning of the story and what he is like at the end. I know that Liam is angry at the beginning of the story. He kicks the wilting sugar beets, upset with both the failing crop and his father's decision to move the family to America. At the end of the story, Liam's anger is subsiding. If you don't know what subsiding means, please go ahead and look it up. I'm not going to tell you. Subsiding is a simple word. He seems resolved to his father's decision. I need to decide what Liam realizes to tell what brings about his change. Make sure that you go ahead and answer this question, and you're going to move on to the next section. In the next section, number 2, you will have to answer for this coach instruction number 2 here. It says, explain how the character's actions support the theme that family members must sometimes sacrifice individual desires for the good of the family. I've gone ahead and highlighted the theme. Okay, so family members must sacrifice individual desires for the good of the family. So what character actions support that theme? Go ahead and read this thinking it through and give me your best response, written response with proper grammar, okay, capitalization, periods, and no misspelled words. Please proofread it so you can get full credit, but please put the effort into this. Now in this next section, we are going to be working on lesson practice part 1, and then later lesson practice part 2. Now you're doing the multiple choice questions as well as the written response. Don't forget to do the written response. Make sure you go through each page unless you'll miss, some of the questions. And some students have done that before. They've answered maybe 1 through 4, and then number 5 is on the next page, and they just did not scroll down, and they missed and got that one wrong. Now, you're going to use the reading guide to help you understand the passage. So they have little check marks here, and those are just little tips, little ideas to think about as you are reading. This first passage for part 1 is called Sisters. The reading guide says, what character traits of each sister are revealed by their interaction, dialogue, and thoughts? You don't have to answer that. This is just, you can go ahead if you want, you can write down some notes on the side, but you do not need to answer this. This is not for a grade. What character traits does the author state directly? And in what ways are Kim and Min different. Okay, so if we go ahead and scroll on down, we continue reading the passage. There are some more reading guide tips here. It says, look for examples of dramatic irony. There's the dramatic irony terminology again. It's referencing what was mentioned before. If you don't remember, go back to the beginning of this page or the section, and you can reread dramatic irony. So look for examples of dramatic irony or information that the reader knows that a character does not know. Same idea as Othello with Iago. And then finally, compare the character's actions and feelings that at the beginning of the story and at the end of the story. How do the characters change? What does each sister learn? This should be simple enough. Okay, so as we scroll on down, we will see these highlighted questions. I went ahead and highlighted them for you to remind you, hey, you have to do these. Okay, so we have questions 1 through 5 here. I also put a little note here so you don't forget the next page. So scroll on down to the next page. Here's number 6. Explain which character traits Kim and Min have at the beginning of the story and how they change by the end of the story. If you refer back to the reading guide, that is the same question as you see here. Things to think about, and they're preparing you to answer the questions. Okay, so I'll go ahead and scroll on down to the next passage. The next passage, lesson practice part 2. It's called Another Thanksgiving Dinner. There is no reading guide here. You'll just go ahead and read all the way through it. And just think about the same thing, dramatic irony, how a character changes, their character motivations. And then you're going to be answering these questions here. So we have questions 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, don't forget the next page. Number 11, and then finally number 12. How does Hannah's volunteer experience affect her? Use examples from the passage in your response. So tell me how it affects her, and then give me some examples that show it affects her. If you use proper grammar, capitalization, punctuation, and you provide those examples, then you most likely will get the full credit for number 12. Okay, try your best. Remember, you're doing the entire section for L3, and good luck. If you have any questions, please go ahead and contact me through Remind.